I want to introduce you to a model that I've been using since about 2003. It's called the KLAIM model. And I'll explain what the acronym actually stands for in just a moment. But it really, to me, summarizes my view of how we ought to be making arguments. But before we get into that, I wanted to give you a snapshot of one of my favorite scholars. His name is Thomas Sowell. He's written over 20 books. I think I have most of them. I've read most of them. And in his wonderful way with words, he says some really important ideas concerning argumentation. In fact, I've left a quote from him on this particular slide, where he says, "It's amazing how many people think that they can answer an argument by attributing bad motives to those who disagree with them. Using this kind of reasoning, you can believe or not believe anything about anything without having to bother to deal with the facts or the logic." We have said earlier in this class and other videos that we live in a very emotive culture. I think one of the metaphors I used in an earlier video was that we literally wear our emotions on our sleeves. The issue for us in an argumentative writing course is that we actually make arguments, and these arguments are not based on emotion. They are based upon facts and logic and research. And so Thomas Sowell gives us something to think about, that we shouldn't simply dismiss somebody else's point of view because we don't like their motives or the motives that we assume that they might have. Give you a snapshot of this that actually happened just this week. Gina Carano, who was one of the character actors in that Mandalorian series that's been put out by Disney, was fired this week for her political views. Her views you can go and read about on YouTube, or just pick up any of the channels that you might be interested in getting your news from, and you'll see all about this particular event in her life. She was shocked by the fact that she was fired because she simply was pointing out that she's concerned about a cancel culture. And what she means by that, and what many people mean by that, is that you're simply shut off and shut up. You don't have an economic status any longer. You lose your job because of what you think or what you believe. These are questions for us that are really powerful and important. I've listed them on the slide. Are words violent simply because you don't agree with them? I understand that some words can produce violence, but does that mean that every word that you disagree with is violent and therefore you need to dismiss that individual or their argument? And should we eliminate the voices of individuals who have different points of view? I hope, by the way, your answer to that question is no. So here is this 5-point grid for understanding all information. If you think about the arrow at the top, think about all the information that we get. How do we summarize? How do we analyze? How do we synthesize all of the ideas that are coming into our thinking? So the first question is, what is the source of our information, which is all about knowledge? So there's the K in the acronym KLAIM. What is the source of our information? Where does it come from? Then, how are we limited? What boundaries may inhibit our thinking as this information comes to us? In the third place, what influence will we use to validate or confirm our knowledge? And that's all about the issue of authority. Then we ask the question, what lens will we look at through which to interpret our world? And finally, mindset, which is probably the most difficult of all the 5. What attitudes will bend our thinking and our way of thought? And by the way, I'm going to be giving a video explanation of each single one of these ideas. So this is simply the model being introduced to us here today. Remember that emotion or trauma or psychological distress is real. And as I've said in other videos, we should be very careful about how we treat people. We should treat them with charity, and our approach should be considerate and caring about where they're coming from and what has happened in their lives. At the same time, however, while we suggest a care in our approach to argumentation, it is not the basis for argument, emotion, that we build arguments upon. So make sure that you understand our approach may be different for some folks in some situations, but at the same time, we don't allow emotion as the basis for how we think about life. So back to Dr. Sowell. If you use your personal emotional concerns to ward off anybody else's argumentation, in his words, you can believe or not believe anything about anything without having to bother to deal with facts or logic. So when you see people shouting at each other, when you see people in the Twitter world lobbing words at each other, inflammatory words, think about these ideas that we should establish our basis for argumentation in the very concepts of facts and logic and argument that have been established for us in a model like the KLAIM diagram: knowledge, limitation, authority, interpretation, and mindset. And we'll come back to each one of those in the future. But consider it now as you consider this next assignment for this next week, as you press on toward the project of reviewing the movie Parasite for project number 1.